How do we construct a unit separating wall in a CLT building? I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do it. Here's the typical one. Now if we have, for those of you who don't know, what's a CLT? CLT, let's go with the black one instead. CLT is cross laminated timber. Oops. It's basically a giant plywood, you could think about it. There's several layers of wood that's glued 90 degrees towards each other, like 5 layers typically. And you can make up to 100, 120, 200, 240, many different thicknesses of these slabs and elements, so you can use them to design and construct walls or floors. But anyways, now we're talking about walls here. How to construct a unit separating wall. And if you have one of these CLT slabs, this could be one way to do it. If you have the CLT here, I paint it like this. And then you need a separate framing structure. So I would recommend that you go with like something like this. 70 millimeters beams. And then you put 2 plates, like 2 layers of gypsum, or if you have 1 layer of plywood and gypsum, that's might be preferable, because that it simplifies so much. We can put screws in it and carry loads on it. And of course you're gonna need also mineral wool in the cavity. And then you're also gonna need, let's see how we could paint this in a good way. This one, air gap. It's very important that you don't attach the beams directly to the CLT, because then you're gonna get transmission. It's gonna go through the beams and straight into that one. But we construct this one as a separate framing structure from the CLT. And that gives a massive improvement in sound insulation. So that's what you should aim for. And now, then depends on how small can you make the air gap. I mean, if you increase the size of the air gap so the whole cavity depth increases, then the sound insulation will improve as you move this one out. But then you're going to lose valuable space that you could otherwise have used or rented. And we don't want that, so we want to keep this one as small as possible. I think to go smaller than 70 millimeters on the framing structure is probably not that nice, because they're going to be so flimsy if you go for thinner beams like 45s. But 70 is probably the common one. And usually you could have like an air gap of perhaps, let's say, 40 millimeters. That's gonna be a really pretty good wall, pretty good sound insulation. But you could perhaps trim this one down also a bit. It all depends on the combination of all the different structures around you. You also need to consider flanking transmission through the ceiling, and the flanking transmission through the floor to the other floor and through the side walls. So all these transmission paths are added in the field, and it doesn't make sense to make a super wall if you have lousy flanking transmission. So you always have to balance these parameters towards and against each other in a good way. Anyways, here's one way to do it, the CLT, but you could also use a double framing structure, load carrying. So if you use perhaps, this one could be CLT maybe 120 to 160 millimeters, but perhaps you could also use a bit thinner. Let's say you have 100 CLT, 100 gap, and then you have another 100 CLT. And then you get some mineral wool in the cavity. So that's another way to do it. But the thing is, this construction is going to be 100, like 300 millimeters, and maybe you need some gypsum on the sides as well, perhaps to take care of fire regulations. Could be that. So this one becomes a bit thicker. But you could also use this one if you want to have some visible wood. if you want to see the wood, the finish, then this is the way to go. You can't achieve that with a structure like this, because then you can only see one side of the CLT. But this wall, you could get to thinner sizes, maybe like 250 in total ish. I'm just dropping the numbers now, but this one tends to be thicker than this one. But they both have their pros and their cons, always, these ones. Yeah, so as you can see, there are many different aspects. I've mentioned, like, besides of sound insulation, there's also fire protection that we need to take into account, and we also need to take into account the aesthetics. So you could do some cool stuff if you have visible wood as well, and different construction solutions makes that possible or not. I think that's enough acoustics for today. And in today's video, I'm wearing a gray turtleneck and a gray jacket, some gray pants as well, these ones. And then I have this little brown pocket square, because this one gives a rather laid back. It's not shouty or vibrant or anything, so it's a pretty soft, pretty cool outfit. It's nice. Maybe this one goes pretty nice with my beard as well. So there's always this colors that keeps repeating itself. And I also noted that the buttons on this one, they have some almost black colors here. And then I used a black belt on these pants, which I also pick up in the buttons here. So that's another parameter that you can think about, the buttons. You have them here as well. But honestly, I would not recommend to use a belt if you have a sweater like this, because there's actually a high probability that you're gonna make some damage to it up here in the front. This one's so much in the way. You could ruin your sweater if you have a belt like this. So I would actually, it's quite preferable to ditch the belt and go like this, if the pants are a good fit. Have a nice weekend. See you later.